everybody. Welcome to HackerRank TV. This is your host Zainab. A very good evening to all of our Indian viewers. For those of you who are joining us from the Bay Area and Pacific time zone, a very good morning. And people tuning in from the Eastern time zone, hope you all are having a lovely afternoon as well. Let us know which city you are tuning in from in the comments below. Our guest for today is All Star Ashish Rathi. And Ashish is somebody who all of us engineers can look up to. After securing his master's degree from the San Jose State University, Ashish has had a very elaborate career as an engineer, having worked for the top tech companies in the world like Citrix, LogMeIn, Yahoo, AWS, and Google. No, I am not listing my dream companies. These are a few Ashish has already worked for. How amazing is that? Naturally, he has a lot of experience in applying to companies and clearing multiple interview rounds. And today, he's here to help us with the same. Welcome to the live stream, Ashish, and to our family of all stars. Couldn't be more excited to learn from you today.
Thank you so much, Zana, for your kind words, and I'm super excited to share my experience with you all. Looking forward to this.
Thank you. Ashish, to set the context for this live stream, can you tell us more about your experience as an engineer?
Oh, sure. As you already introduced, I'm currently working for Google as a senior software engineer, and I work for the Pixel team. We are trying to build an infra with machine learning to support all the Pixel devices here. And before this, I worked for 2 years for AWS, and there I worked for the SageMaker team, which is the machine learning platform. And I luckily got to work on one of the cutting edge technologies in AI currently. And before that, I worked for Yahoo. And during that tenure, I got to work on some cool apps and was able to be a part of their backend infrastructure team. So I mean, the list goes on like in the back. And it's almost been like 7, 8 years in the US. And I'm happy to share my experience through this journey with all of you.
That's very nice to hear. Before we discuss how to nail the interviewing process, how do you know which companies you're going to apply for? Are there criteria that people should see before applying to startups and established companies?
Um, it's a very good question, actually, and the answer is a little bit different for who is applying for. So, if you're a fresh grad out of college, and then if you are looking for internships, at that point you don't have much choice where you want to apply. And at that time, I feel depending on your resume, depending on your stream, you can make a decision, but be open to more opportunities out there. Try looking out for uh, different, I would say different, all different type of streams, being back end, front end, and don't be choosy at that point. And keep applying at that point, and then once you grow in your career, you have much more options open to you. At that time, you can be choosy, and then try to fit yourself into any stream. And the thing is, if you, let's say, if you are a backend engineer, then you won't be a backend engineer for a whole of your life. It's not true. So actually, you can change your stream when you are I mean, progressing in your career. So yeah.
So, there are a few ways through which people can apply for jobs, be it through cold emailing, LinkedIn, or referrals. But according to you, what is the best way to do it?
So the best way definitely will be LinkedIn. So applying on LinkedIn is much easier. You are actually redirected to a jobs website when you're applying there, and it's much easier to maintain your profile there. Much easier for recruiters to search you, and it's actually a very easy and interactive process there. Uh, Cold emailing I don't personally prefer, because it's like you're reaching out to people who are maybe not looking for out for hiring. So that should definitely be the last way. And then you can of course like go to companies job portals and apply, but then don't expect like a call sooner. The best way I would say is just apply on LinkedIn, and also keep checking all the job portals and people posting on LinkedIn about openings and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, now that we have covered the bases, Ashish will now take us through a few slides and help us understand this whole procedure to the T. Take it away, Ashish.
Sure. Thank you.
A little something for our viewers. You can drop in all your questions in the comment section, and we will feature them on the screen, and Ashish will be able to answer them. So, feel free to drop in all your questions.
Cool. Thanks, Anna. Do you see my screen share?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So the I prepared some slide on what I experienced through my journey, and this is mostly a non-technical guide. I'm not going to go through like a bunch of questions that you need to prepare or the places you want to look for questions. So all those things are already available online, and there's like an ocean of information out there. So in that ocean of information, how do you make sure you're looking at the right questions, you have enough time to prepare? And that's what the purpose of this guide would be. Okay. So the very first thing, there's no like one single algorithm that you can just look at and crack the interviews. I mean, there's algorithms all over the place, but not for the interviews. And it takes like a lot of time, efforts, and patience. Like to reach where you want. So keep that in mind. And once you are in the interviews, it will take a bunch of confidence. It will take your preparedness and luck to crack the interviews. So sorry, this is not a philosophy class. I know. So I'll not bore you with this stuff. I'll get into the main details. So what I aim with this slides is like tell you about some do's and don'ts for how to prepare, then how you can optimize your time and not waste your time in something that will never be asked in the interviews, and show some areas and topics of focus. So let's get started. So step one is where to apply, when to apply, how to apply. That's the very first step, getting calls. And at early stage, this is a hassle, right? When you look at job postings, it's like everybody wants people with experience. And then that's so crazy, right? How do you get experience without working anywhere? So of course, don't worry about people posting that. It's like a norm right now. Just look at the opening job, like the early stage jobs that you see for fresh grads, and apply for those. Don't look at how much experience they need. So at early stage, of course, you need to apply a lot. But before applying, make sure you have fine-tuned and updated your resume. Most of the people, they'll just make one copy of the resume and keep applying. Fine-tuning is really important, and make that a process. Don't make that like one time thing and just spend month on that. Make that a process. Keep updating, fine tuning your resume. Put keywords that will match the job description, uh, that the job description has mentioned, right? And at first you can't be picky, as I said earlier, right? So make sure you apply for different type of jobs, like front and back end, all kind of opportunities. And also, don't apply blindly. Like, I've seen people applying for hundreds of jobs and then saying, hey, I don't get a single call. You can't apply for every single job out there, right? So make sure at least some of your profile, your resume matches with that job description, and it doesn't like match at all, and then of course you'll not get the call. And do your homework, keep up with the hiring news, keep up with the LinkedIn posts. There's a lot posted. I actually got my first internship here from a job posting on college's board, and one of my friends just came and told me about it. So you never know where the opportunity is not knocking from. So keep your ears open, keep be alert, right? And then make sure that your projects and courses and interests align with the job description, so you can have a targeted resume for each application. So in that case, you will have a higher chance of turnout. Yeah.
So we have a question here.
Uh-huh.
So yes, Zainab Muhammad asks, "Hello, I have a question. How does one know their field of interest in tech?"
Well, that's a very good question, Asana. So we really don't know at start. That's why I said don't be picky, because you will only know once you start working. So unless you work as a front end engineer, you will not know, I hate front end. I don't want to do all that. So it's like you have to experience it. Well, you will have experienced it through your projects, but working on college projects and working on companies projects is totally different, right? So unless you experience it, I would say you'll not have that answer. uh, so definitely you will have some choice in your mind. Like, once you have worked on some projects, you will have some choice. Hey, I really like to work building microservices, and then you will know, okay, I can try backend, and then maybe I'll know better about my choices. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yes. I thank you for asking the question, Zainab. And we have another question from Raj. Do we need to master all techs, or a master of single technology is enough?
Cool. Yeah, that's a great question, Raj. Actually, at this age, we don't need to master any technology at all, right? People actually say you need like a T-shaped skills, that you know a lot of technologies things, but you have mastered one of them. But what I feel is the industry is so fast paced that there's a new technology coming every other day, right? So you can't keep up with that. So let's say you're a very fine-tuned C++ engineer and you're only looking for that job, although you know other technologies. But then what if it gets outdated? What if only few companies are looking for that, right? So what you need to do is prepare yourself that you should be able to learn anything. So that's why so many tech companies, they don't want your experience in a particular technology. They want you to be a good problem solver. They want you to be a great thinker, a great communicator, and willing to learn, and like as opposed to being a master of any technology.
Yes, thank you for answering that question, Ashish.
Mhm,
And here is another question.
mhm.
Uh, Abu Bakar asked us, I am based in Lagos, Nigeria. I have applied for over thousands of jobs on LinkedIn. I have never got a call for an interview, yet my profile is strong. What can I do to impress recruiters?
Wow. So yeah, that seems odd, like having applied for so many jobs. Um, so I think maybe you can try fine tuning your job descriptions or your past experience and your projects. Maybe that can help. And also, when you apply on LinkedIn, I feel like LinkedIn algorithm learns about your interest as well, right? So if you have applied for too many jobs, then the it might be confused, right? So be more targeted, I guess, in that sense. Maybe not thousands, but a little less than that. And there's nothing like impressing the person, right? Recruiters are also filtering out people, so maybe you're not coming in that filter, right? So again, depending on your experience, try highlighting your achievements, try highlighting some keywords from your experience or projects, and try applying again. And it doesn't matter how much time you apply, it won't like make your profile bad. Do reapply for jobs, and maybe keep one of the stream in mind, maybe for now, and target that, and maybe recruiters will know your interests.
I think we can continue with the slideshow for now, Ashish.
Sure, sure. What to do for mid and late stages for application? I feel like you still keep need to updating your resume and your LinkedIn profile regularly, and do apply on LinkedIn. And this is odd coming from me, like ironical that don't jump your ships too fast. I have already changed so many companies. What I mean here is at least stay in one company for 1 or 2 years and work on a few projects, gain some experience, because this question comes often from a recruiter. Hey, why are you leaving your current job? And at that point, you need to have a good answer. You can't be like telling the real things, that they pay less salary or the manager is bad, right? You can't say those things out loud. You have to be diplomatic, saying, hey, I'm looking for a career growth, I'm looking for a better opportunity out there, and I'm maybe working on a project that's too old and I'm bored with that. Like I want something more that gets me out of my comfort zone. So have some experience that you can explain to recruiter and your interviewers. And and at least I think you can line up a few interviews in a go. And why I say this is, it goes against your thinking. Like you say, hey, I lined up 10 interviews, it's too much to prepare. Actually, it's not. Once you're prepared for your very first interviews, you are prepared for the rest 9 interviews as well, right? So why just schedule them every month and then go through that hassle? Rather, just squeeze them together, and there will be a little bit preparation different for each company. So you can just schedule them maybe 4 or 5 days apart. But then the advantage is you get to get you might be getting the offers into like in a go, and you can also negotiate, you can have competing offers. So yeah. Okay. Moving ahead, in this slide I just wanted to cover the resume which I was talking about earlier. So here's like a snapshot of my resume from 2017 and now in 2021. So how it evolved over time, it might not be visible, so I'll be sharing the resume on bigger screen after this. So a few key things to remember about resume: keep it one pager. No matter how much experience you have got, make sure it's one page. It any experience can fit in page. You can just highlight your achievements because nobody has time to go through two pages. One page itself is too much there. And make sure you have keywords, good keywords on your resume that you have worked on. Mention the impact that you had on your projects or the team, or even like if you have an impact on bigger population, do mention that on your resume. Mention the tech stack that you have worked on, and if you have technical papers or patents, it's amazing to put there. It's like highlights your resume, makes it a different one. So, and wrote FIFO there, like first to be in your resume is first to be out. It's kind of like if you're initially, when you have a lot of college projects, push them out in order of their incoming, right? In order of importance. So you have to eventually have a resume which is full of your experience, work experience, and only key things there, right? And do brag on your resume. It doesn't look bad. Brag there. That's the only place you need get to brag, right? So I'll quickly show you a glimpse of my resume here. In no way this is the ideal resume, but I fine tuned it over time, so maybe it will give you some idea. So here's how it looks. Uh, I actually changed this. Don't put whole of your address, just put the city where you are at, and maybe your number, good contact info, your LinkedIn handle. I used to put my GitHub handle, but I stopped doing that because if you have stale projects there, someone will look there and then they'll ask, "Hey, I don't see any updates there." And if they ask a question and you don't know about your own project, so don't do that. Um, Cover your skills, and make sure you highlight the ones that you want targeted there, right? Your education can be covered in a line or two, and then mention your experience in the order, chronological order, right? And one thing I didn't like about is this tenure that you worked on. You can like write in a bracket how many years you have worked for that company. It's easier for someone to read through that. Mention if you have led some teams, led some projects, and go through that chronological order. And I still have some academic projects that I want to highlight. Maybe it will go away later. So yeah, that's just like a snapshot of my resume. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty, like how to prepare, right? And the very first step is to master your data structure basics. And when I say master the basics, I'm not saying, hey, go ahead and spend months just reading that Corman book and reading all the data structure and algorithms. No, just know the basics enough so that you can write a program to, you might be able, you should know the syntax, basic syntax, and how the basics work there, right? Shouldn't take more than a week just to learn the basics. Things for like trees, you should know the pre-order, post-order traversal, how it is done, the basic recursion loop. For graphs, you should know the different way it's represented, things like that. And just practice 2 to 3 problemming on each concept. Okay. Um, so next, the next step would be going through the actual question set. Now here I've written like depth first and not breadth first. What I mean here is, don't go ahead and just try mastering all the algorithms and forget about the actual interview questions, right? Start with the questions. Start with the question, then you will get a concept that you don't know. Read that concept and then read the underlying data structures, master those, and then move on to the next question. So this way you go depth first, because next question that you encounter might have the same concept and you might be able to answer it without looking at that concept. So try to cover as many questions. I have wasted so much time just preparing algorithms and not looking at the questions, so I regret that. Don't repeat that. So try the actual interview questions. Okay, this will take around 1 or 3 months depending on your expertise, depending on your knowledge. So spend much time, practice a lot of questions.
So, Ashish, we have this question from Mahita. Do I have to invest my time on improving my problem solving capacity, or I have to focus on certification courses?
Oh, okay. So initially, when you're applying, maybe a few certifications help highlight your skills. So of course, certifications help, but in interviews, your certifications won't matter. What matters is that companies, what technical interview questions they are asking, what system design interview questions they're asking. So at that time, not even your college degree matters. So preparing for the interviews, you are just going without all your achievements and background. So definitely you have to prepare, but having a few certifications when you're beginning to apply always helps to get you filtered in the top resumes. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, cool. So moving on, there are some tips and tricks that I learned over time of how to prepare. So I've seen people bragging that, hey, I've practiced 500 questions and I still can't crack into it. Like, why? Why 500 questions? You can get done with 50 if you have solved them by yourself without looking at the answers, right? So don't go behind the volume. Go behind being able to solve by yourself. So practice as many questions, but solve by yourself. Don't brag about looking at 500 questions because that doesn't help. Okay, and then don't go get comfortable in easy questions. It's so easy to feel rewarding when you're solving easy questions. You're like, hey, I'm able to solve other questions, but they're easy, right? Those are not asked in the interviews. Focus more on medium. That's the major set which gets asked, or maybe a few hard questions once you're done with medium, but very less easy questions. Um, Okay, so and also do practice real interview questions. Look from Glassdoor, Blind, and blog post. There's bunch of information available online. You can download as many questions. You once you start looking, you can create a whole big question set. So do practice real interview questions than just practicing different questions, right? And do maintain a running document of your interview questions. Um, this helps you because questions get repeated. You learn from your own mistakes. So do maintain a running doc. I do that because then I can practice again what I didn't know, and learn the basic DSL Go syntax. This is really important because if you don't know the language you're coding in during the interview, it actually doesn't look good. So and you don't use them in practice daily. You might not be using priority queue in your daily job. It hardly gets used. So you have to practice it explicitly. Practice the basics of all the data structure, how they're initialized, how the some methods are used. So in C++, the standard template library, in Java, it's collections. Do master them. It will take hardly 2 or 3 days, but learn them before the interviews so that you can write the code very fast. And if you want to learn some concept better, you're not able to understand from the text, look at some videos online help that represents it pictorially. It makes it easier for you to grasp that concept. Unless you understand something by heart, you'll not be able to master it. Okay, so moving on, if there's one key takeaway from all this, how to prepare, it's practice questions without looking up the answers. It might take you hours or even days for hard questions, but invest that much time. You might think, hey, I only have 1 hour to solve the interview questions. Why should I spend hours on that? It wires up your brain in a way that you're able to solve problems on your own. And that's really important. At least 50% of the questions that I've encountered in past have been totally new questions that I've never seen. So to be able to solve such questions, your brain should be wired up in that way. So do practice that.
Great.
Okay. Okay, so the next topic I want to cover was now what? I'm prepared, what to do during the interview, right? So a few steps that you might have seen online, reading the question out loud, that always helps. Helps you and helps the interviewer understand what the question he has copied and pasted on the screen, right? So yeah, do read it out loud. Explain your interpretation. You might be thinking something else, and interviewer might be thinking something else. So do tell your interpretation. State your assumptions. Hey, so given an example, if someone says, can you write code for uh, detecting islands in a matrix of 1 and 0, then you might be asking, okay, here my assumption is there's a matrix with zeros and ones, and ones are all the connected ones horizontally and vertically. I'll search for that island in that matrix, right? But interviewer might be thinking, hey, even diagonal is connected, and that might be his assumption, right? So make
Yeah.
sure you state your assumption and get the feedback from them. And then once you're done, take your time thinking and explain your approach. If you know the brute force, do tell that. It's not like you should know the optimal approach at first. Do tell your brute force approach and then tell the time and space complexity. And then go ahead with the optimal approach and its time and space complexity. And then you go ahead and ask, should I go ahead and start writing the code? If you follow these simple steps, it helps you, and it's like a process in interviewer's brain. You have to go through these steps. You cannot jump right into coding. So do follow this. And I have highlighted time and space complexity in bold here because it's one of the crucial part of your interview, technical interview especially. So here's just one quick glance over that. Uh, It's a simple question. If you have to find number of digits in an integer, what do you think is the time complexity? You can quickly post your answer. Uh, it goes against the thinking. It's not that easy. Like just to think, but I mean, in implementation, it's very easy. Just give it like
Quick answer, guys.
it's okay. It's hard to think of it directly. The complexity is actually of log n. But if you see the base is the base 10 there. And this is something I actually encountered during one of the questions. Of course, the question wasn't find number of digits. It was a part of that question. But we don't understand this log time complexity. Log to the base 10 is the time complexity. And why is it that? Because you divide by 10 to that number. If it's as some people are saying it's O of n, so n being the number, let's say not the number is 1,000, so or at 10,000, let's say. So it's not. Yeah, actually, it comes back to O of n in case of log to the base 10. So so remember, in case of tree, it's log to the base 2. So if you forget to tell the base, then it becomes a little confusing. So let's say for hash map lookup, if I ask you, the best case time complexity is of 1, right? But what is the worst case time complexity? So the worst case actually is of n, right? So in it can be there can be hash map where everything is just in a one single bucket, and you have to look up all the numbers there. So it's actually of n. Someone answered it correct. Yes, right, Moses. So do master your time complexity before the interview, because they'll ask you to explain that. Don't just like memorize it. Okay. And now, okay, so moving at what to some tips during the interview. If you can write the code very fast, uh, that gives brownie points to your interview experience, because then they know you have a grasp over that language. You can solve it so fast. A small uncomfortable silences during the interview is totally fine. Don't be nervous. If you ask, hey, give me 2 minutes to think, don't get nervous. Hey, I can't remember the answer. Give yourself time. Just forget about the interview for that 2 to 5 minutes. Give yourself that time. And writing messy code at first during the interview is totally okay. You don't have to write the best code. You just have 45 minutes or 1 hour to answer. So do write a messy code that works and then try to refine it. And only add comments if you really don't understand or remember the syntax. Do write a comment so that interviewer knows what you're trying to think or trying to write there. If the logic is too complicated, a comment helps. And if you're running out of time, just put bunch of comments. Yeah, I'm going to do this and this. It really helps. You might be able to like clear that interview. And finally, handle some edge cases at the end, and do run through your code some with good generalized example. So given a sorting algorithm, don't put an example of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is not a very good case. Do put a little complicated example that runs through some edge cases. Okay, so remember that during the interview. If we have time, then I can cover maybe a little bit of system design, or else Zanab, you're good on time.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. You can cover this.
Okay, so I cannot cover much in details about system design interviews. It's a topic in itself, but a few tips here. Uh, it doesn't take a lot of time to prepare for system design. It's more theoretical. Here you are just going through more of theory, right? So you can read through some books or some good blog posts or even some good YouTube videos. So it's much easier as compared to technical interviews, but at the same really, really important. This interview decides your level at that company. If you crack this interview, you can get up leveled in the applying company, right? So read through as many examples here, because each example covers a unique aspect of system design. Tiny URL, Twitter, Instagram, there's so many examples out there. And only deep dive into the topics that are relevant to the company you're applying for. So if you're applying for a company that deals mostly with databases, do read databases in details. There are books that covers databases in the nitty gritty detail, like where they how actually database works behind the scenes, right? So do read a little bit about that, because it obviously helps in your interview experience. The book I really loved about for preparing was Designing Data Intensive Application by O'Reilly. And online, I found bunch of resources on YouTube, system design specific questions, right? So do practice all those. And these are the few steps that you go through in a system design interview. You first start with features and scoping. Don't really jump into drawing all those boxes. Okay, first jot down the features, and you cannot design all the features in one go. Your features have to be very specific and relevant. So if you're designing Twitter, you only design the wall and maybe friends or sorry followers and things like that. So that itself will cover the whole interview. So first scope it, then do the capacity estimation. Capacity estimation is much easier. Don't memorize it. Everybody wants to design you at scale. Nobody's asking you to design for 10 people or 100 people, right? So it gets similar. The only thing that differs is what's the read and write estimation. Some things can be read heavy versus write heavy, and something can be balanced. You need to know that beforehand, right? So and estimation, you don't have to remember. You can just say 10,000 QPS system, 11,000, doesn't really matter. The numbers nobody's going to memorize. uh, then let's jump into the API design. API design is really important and very easy. It's just the input and output your system is going to give, right? um, then we move on to high level design. High level design is that box part. Now this is the major part of that interview. We are drawing the client, then the load balancer, then your application server, database, and everything you are going to put together in a nice diagram. And that's where the interviewer will jump into the discussion, right? Here you'll ask, hey, what is that box? What does that box do? And you have to label it correctly. You have to make sure that you remember all the system design concepts here. And at that point, you will eventually come into DB, where they'll ask you to design a database schema. They'll even ask you to maybe write a query or two. So be prepared with that basic SQL syntax, and don't be like, hey, I don't remember SQL at all. I didn't prepare. Prepare some SQL basic syntax. And finally, everyone will want you to scale it, have add some caching, some sharding, and even they'll jump consistent hashing. I have been asked about consistent hashing at least 2 or 3 interviews. It's a easy concept to learn if you go through some good tutorials. So easy to prepare, but it's elaborate. So go through all that material and master this. This will give you a good level in the applying company. Okay. So that's all for what I wanted to discuss. Hope that helps. Open for questions and answer.
Sure. This is one of the questions we got. What is the importance of mathematics in coding? Which topic should we cover before competitive coding?
Um, I would say if you're learning about big O complexity and maybe basic logic, it might help. But I have never seen extensive knowledge of maths while like giving. Maybe if you're approaching for maybe machine learning interviews, you a knowledge of statistics might help if they're asking you the detailed implementation of how an ML model is trained, what is statistical regression and stuff like that. But otherwise, it's not really required. So you don't have to prepare math separately. If it comes down to say it's depth first, look at the question, and if that question requires you some knowledge of maths, deep dive into that. So that should help.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish. And we have another question from Snegha. What will make my resume to be shortlisted first? Getting shortlisted itself is the first step.
Yes, Nega. So definitely, it's a very critical and it's very difficult part. So as I said, keywords definitely help. So what you can do is a little experiment. Modify your resume in a way that it matches the job description keywords, right? You can look at the job description on the job portal, and maybe if they're requiring experience in some technology or maybe some field, like hey, you should have some experience designing a microservice, do mention that in your resume. Eventually nobody is going to look at each candidate, right? They just want to filter out candidates. So the filtering itself is the step one, and then they may be sorted by people with experience and stuff like that. So of course we can't do anything much when you're applying as a fresher. So the only thing is find in your resume, keep applying and see which one works, right? That might help.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. And Abhisheka and a lot others have requested that you share your presentation, and it might be very helpful for them.
Sure, sure. I'll share the this presentation with after this talk. Maybe I don't know. I can share on the link for this talk, right? So
Yes.
yeah, I'll share it after this talk. Definitely.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. So now that we are all pros at at the theoretical part, And well, one second. I think the stream. Yes. Okay, so now that we are all pros at the theoretical part of the interviewing process, let's understand from Ashish how to tackle common interview situations. So, Ashish, I'll be presenting a few scenarios to you, and you have to react to them like you would during the interview.
Sure.
Great. So, my first situation is you don't know the answer to the question.
Okay, so well, this happens a lot, right? During initial phases, how will I know answer to all the questions? So if you don't know the answer to question, first of all, don't. I mean, eh, I can't say this. Don't panic because I panic myself. It's a panic situation. Oh my God, I'm feeling this interview. At that moment, just breathe through. Like everyone goes through that. Maybe you know the answer, so you know that initially this happened, but you actually do know the answer to question. You can try solving it in a way, and a lot of time interviewers help. So if you are trying to poke into some right direction, they'll say, hey, yeah, you're right, you're going in the right direction, and that helps. So during one of my interviews, I was asked this question, given a keypad, that old phone keypad, which has each number has that A, B, C, D, E, F, right?
Yes.
You have to write a program which gives me the combination of all possible characters or all possible strings I can form given a phone number. And I'm like,
Wow.
I have never seen that question. I really, but it actually uses a simple recursion concept, right? And actually I was able to come up with during that interview. Initially I panicked, but then I'm like, okay, I'll try to work it along with them. So of course it's cliche to say like, hey, don't panic, you are going to panic, but then take a deep breath, remember a concept and try to work it on a board. So during an actual interview on site, you have a big whiteboard, but during a virtual interview they give you a bad whiteboard online. Don't use that. Maybe use a good whiteboard at home. So I actually said and asked, requested them, I'll be using a whiteboard at home, and it helps. The interviewer was so happy that I was using a whiteboard. It helps you to explain. I don't always have words to explain. It's easier done on a board. Go through that process maybe at home. That's why I say if you practice a lot without looking at the answer, you might be able to come up with the answer.
Yeah.
And once you go through that experience, once you fail a few interviews, you learn, you gain your some confidence. So yeah.
Okay. My second question is when you fake something on your resume and the interviewer asks a question on the same.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, initially, when you're designing your resume, really don't know all the languages, right? And maybe some technologies, and you have to say, hey, I know Java Spring Boot. And then they ask you some very specific question. Like, I don't know. So it's okay to fake or write something. It's not really fake if you go ahead and learn little bit about it. So do read your own resume before going to that interview, because at that time they have your resume open on screen. They'll be asking questions what they read, and if something catches their eye, they'll ask. So okay to maybe I would say fake, but read it beforehand, right? Read what you have written on your resume, and then go into the interview, and that should help. Yeah.
Okay. When you fumble while answering questions.
Okay, yeah, this is also very common, and nobody is going to hold you against fumbling. Fumbling is common. You don't have those nice words created or nice sentences in your brain that you can just blurt out and explain the concept. So that's why maybe a pictorial representation helps at that time. Explaining a concept on a whiteboard is much easier. And if you're fumbling, give yourself some time, maybe point to the whiteboard, write something out, and don't be scared. Nobody's going to hold you against it as long as you're able to convey the message. So, yeah.
Okay. Uh, when you start over explaining an answer, so you lose track of the original question.
Okay. Well, over explaining happens a lot. Like I've seen this in at the interviews. So over explanation is something where you are going and talking and not stopping. So make it a conversation. Make it a way that you only answer what the interviewers asked, and then wait for their input, wait for their so you don't go ahead and just not, hey, this is the concept, this is the brute force approach, this is the time complexity. Wait, you explain something, then let them ask, hey, what's the time complexity, and then you go ahead and say it. So make it more like a conversation with your colleague, like you have. instead of just like speaking and speaking. So uh, then it becomes boring. Interview is not actually actively listening to everything you say. So that's why if you make it a conversation, it's much easier for both parties to communicate.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish. And I think we can take one situation from the audience as well.
Sure.
So, viewers, would you like to give Ashish a situation to react to? Any interview situation which you have faced, which you'd like Ashish's, experience on it. Meanwhile, I think we can like take this question up, Ashish. Paran Modi asked us, could you please suggest some good resources to prepare for system design questions?
Sure. Hi, Parin. Parin is actually one of my friends. So, hi, nice to meet you here. Okay, so for system design question, what I actually prepared from was from maybe YouTube videos. Even I think I have referred to HackerRank preparation material. There's good information there, and I have there's grokking the system design interview, and I have seen some very good blog post on Medium.com. So you know what? That's what I said. There's so much information out there. Some of the videos will help. Videos are good, and why? Because videos are actually telling you how you're going to approach that interview, right? So there's bunch of YouTubers who have posted such good videos where they're actually going through that system design on a whiteboard, and that's exactly what you're going to do in your original interview. So that's the best resource I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, Paran, for asking that question. We have a situation given by David. So, if you don't remember the syntax for a question, what do you do?
Good question, David. Yeah, you can't always remember everything. I remember during one of my interviews, they asked me to read something from a file, and I chose the language C++, and I had never encountered file handling in C++. I'm like, what the hell? What do I do? I don't know. And at that time, I panicked. I actually spent almost 15 to 20 minutes just coming up with like, hey, how do you do file handling in C++? I could have just said, hey, in a comment, I'll read from this file, just write something, some fake syntax there. The interviewer might not be impressed, but at least complete the question. Because if you come up with the answer, it might play in your way, right? It might count in your brownie points that you're able to come up with the answer, and it's okay to forget a syntax. So I actually ended up not answering the question and failing the interview. So just don't hold on yourself against, but maybe a basic syntax is okay. Learn Java collections and standard template library in C++, or maybe Python is so easy, so maybe in Python whatever the libraries, master that. It takes a hardly a day or two.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ashish. So, my next question to you is when you apply for multiple interviews, you are bound to get rejected too, right? Do
Yeah.
you have a good rejection story or any frameworks that you use to deal with them?
Well, sure. I mean, rejection is all what I remember. So, like, this is the real part of the story. What you see on the top is, hey, you work for this company. But behind the scenes, I have been rejected so many times. And it's the crucial part, right? From rejection, you just don't learn those questions that you didn't know. You gain a lot of confidence as well. So now this goes against that. Some people get disheartened. It's okay to get disheartened. Even when I got some offers and got rejected from only one or two companies, I was so disheartened because I expected. So the real reason anyone gets disheartened is because they expected a positive outcome. And when do you expect a positive outcome is when you had a very good interview, which you felt like it was good, but maybe it wasn't. And most of the times it might be some mistake that you did, but sometimes it's not your fault. So I have two rejection stories. One, but it really wasn't. I actually had a very positive feedback from a recruiter, and still didn't get the call back. Like I still didn't get the job. And then one time, actually, it was totally my fault. So this goes with LinkedIn. I applied for LinkedIn, got their call, and I actually rocked the interviews, like all 6, 7 rounds of the interviews, and actually got a feedback from the recruiter that they got overwhelmingly positive feedback there. And I'm like, oh my god, I cracked it. And next few days, I didn't get any word from them. Like literally for 2, 3 weeks, they just ghosted. Then one day they come, hey, one of these interviews was really not that good. I think that's why we're not going. And I'm like, what? I have your email saying that you had a very good like interviews. What's up with that? I'm like, okay, like I totally was, and it's okay to be sad. I can't say you don't be sad. Just don't lose hope. You did your the best, and when you know you cracked something, you will be able to crack any other interview. In that same moment, I actually got some good offers. So if you're getting some offers, getting rejected, it's just a part of life. They might have not, that requirement must have gone. They might have selected someone else. Just be okay. Like after some time, be okay. Go ahead and prepare and give other interviews. And sometimes it is your fault. Initially, when I was going through internships, I actually didn't know many basic concepts. Like I actually failed an interview where I didn't know the internal implementation of a hash map. Somebody asked me, hey, can you design a hash map? I'm like, well, I know what is hash map. I don't know the design of the hash map. I'm like, oh my god. And that was such a basic thing to not know. I'm like, oh my God, if I don't know this, how will I crack? And after that, actually went back home, mastered it. Like I read through all internal implementation, what is actually getting a hash key, how it is arranged in a like different buckets, how do you mod it with the capacity and stuff like that. And after that, it got asked in at least 3 or 4 interviews, and I actually was able to rock those questions. So do learn from your mistakes. It definitely helps.
Glad to hear that, Ashish. Glad to hear that story. It was an amazing one. So, my final question to you is, what would be your top three advice for our viewers who are now going to be appearing for interviews?
Okay, so the very first advice to get your resume filtered is update your resume. Read your own resume and keep updating and fine tuning it. Don't go into a habit that I created a good resume and now it's going to be work for every job I apply. It doesn't work. And more than resume, I think now it's the age of LinkedIn where everyone is applying on LinkedIn. Update your LinkedIn profile. We forget the LinkedIn profile while doing the resume. Do that. It's a very simple practice. Once you get into practice, it's easy. Next thing is master basics, but then go ahead and practice as many questions in that depth first manner, and do practice them yourself. Don't look at the answer. You know what? Give yourself few days even if you're not able to come up. Don't think, oh my God, I'm dumb. You're not. It takes time to master that skill. So give yourself time to think. Maybe it will take more time. And the third point is, well, keep trying. I mean, I got my dream job very late, maybe in my career. It happens. You don't lose hope and don't get into a comfort zone in your career. To grow in your career, I have seen when I was back in Yahoo, I was in such a comfort zone. It's a dream company. I love my job. There's so much perks here. But then if you're not growing in your career, don't stop there. Keep progressing. If you don't see a progress plan or a path in your own company, start applying. It helps, right? So yeah, those will be my three key advice.
Thank you, Ashish. So, let's take up a few questions from the audience, shall we?
Sure.
Okay. So, is solving okay, Sugam Kirenji asked us, is solving coding questions in our preferred language is okay or should do in C++, Java?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, it's totally okay to solve in your preferred language, even if the interviewer doesn't know. So at Google, I know there are panels of people who know that language. They'll only interview you. So if you choose C++, be prepared. Those people are masters in C++, right? They are not people who don't know. But in some companies, they'll not have. So I actually remember interviewing with the interviewer didn't know the syntax, and I actually got to explain him, which added brownie points to my interview. So it's always good to choose your preferred language, but then don't choose a language to be some very alienated. Like don't choose a language which is not a mainstream. Java, C++, Python, even JavaScript is okay, but then don't go beyond that. I mean, like even famous language like Go is not that widely practiced. So all these four top languages which you have already seen in your college career, they are good choice.
Okay. Thank you, Ashish. And we have another question from Uruj.
Mhm.
Ma'am, please answer that. What question to practice on lead code? Selected questions sheet.
Cool. So lead code, hackering, any platform. The problem is the selected questions sheet. You can't actually say, hey, these are the top 50, 100 questions. Uh, Filter out the most recently asked questions and most frequently asked questions, and then practice those as opposed to just going through a whole question set. Uh, you can actually arrange that in that order, and you can get the latest questions in so many blog posts, Glassdoor, blind.com, if you know that. So you definitely get the latest questions there. But even after preparing all those, you can't be sure, hey, they'll ask. Google actually doesn't ask questions that are there available online. So, there's a high chance of getting a question that was never asked, but it will depend on the same concept. So if you have seen a similar question, practice that concept, you might be able to answer that. So, yeah.
Okay. Another question by Guru Rajan is, hello team, plan to solve more hacker rank challenges and have my rank increased and share with the interviewer. Will this tactic help on getting more opportunities?
Sure, that I said right earlier, you can brag if you have improved rank on your hacker rank. If you have even won like a third place or fifth place in some coding competition, highlight that on your resume. You never know. So you know what, like, well, while filtering resume, you have like 100 resumes in your hand. When you look at someone's achievement, you say, hey, this guy has done something. So do highlight your achievements. No achievement is small, so anything that you have achieved, it's good to highlight. Provide a link or maybe a small tag for that in your resume or LinkedIn profile. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to take this moment to tell our viewers about Hacker Resume. So, Hacker Resume is a platform where it's a free platform where you can put in your information and it gives you an automated it generates your resume for you. So, I hope your work gets cut into half there, and you'll use Hacker Resume for your further resume needs. Yep. So our next question is, what type of what type of questions should we ask to interviewer at the end of interview?
Oh wow, yeah, this is a great question. So you know what? Ideally, we are so excited if the interview went well. We really don't have any questions, but do prepare some questions. Very basic questions like, can you maybe describe a day in your work? You know what? It gives them confidence that you're interested in the job. They are really not looking for very amazing question, unique question. All they want to know is, have you read the job description? Are you really interested in their job? That's all. And if you really rock the interview, even a question won't matter. It just gives them confidence in you that, hey, you are really interested in the job. So you can just repeat the same question in every interview. It will not matter. I generally ask the interviewers, say, I would really like to know more about how the day looks like in your job. Maybe can you tell me or describe me a scenario that I'll get to work on? Maybe ask about the team, ask about the culture. It's gets asked everywhere. It's fine. Just ask some very simple question. Doesn't really matter.
We have another question from Abu Bakr. I have an interview with Amazon, and the first stage is this week. I do not know what to really focus on as I have been solving problems from different websites. I am really afraid. What do you advise?
Cool. So having interview with Amazon, if this is the first stage being the phone screen or that their coding test, the questions there are all technical, and those questions might be difficult. I have had the very first round of most of the interviews being the most difficult. So I'm not scaring you here. You said you're already afraid. uh, Try your best, prepare with as much material. Look up the latest or recent Amazon questions. People have posted so many questions online. Practice those. Make sure you master each concept, right? You have went through at least a few questions of each. Don't leave one algorithm altogether. Don't say, hey, I am too bored to maybe read graph questions. I will not maybe practice those. You never know. I have been asked like only graph interview questions in one of my interviews with Uber. They'll only ask graph related questions. So you have to practice each of those sets. And at the end, those really first rounds are the most difficult. So don't get disheartened. Practice your best, read all the concepts, and go with a chill mind. It's okay to fail at first. And I think being prepared so much, I remember your earlier question. You have already applied so much. I think you're prepared. So be confident there. You'll be able to crack it. Just keep that in mind. I'll be able to crack it.
Best of luck, Abu Bakr. And we have another question from Umang Sharma. How do we change our tech domain after 4 years of experience in that? My resume doesn't get picked up for other roles.
Well, I totally agree with that. It's difficult to change having a lot of experience maybe in just one domain, not having some in other. So at that time, what happens is maybe if your company allows switching to a new role within the company, you can jump there, get some experience, and then try switching. That works always. And not all the roles out there are looking for people with experience. So I got my first role working as a machine learning engineer in Amazon without any prior experience. So once you gain some good experience, you never know what call you're going to get, right? It gets converted in that sense. So you can always apply for those roles. Even they say you should have 4 years as a machine learning, do apply for that. Although the conversion rate would be a little lower, you might apply for 10 and only get one selected, but do apply with confidence for those roles as well. Maybe mention some machine learning experience in your personal projects or your college projects or something like that, where your resume gets at least shortlisted, and then they'll give you a call based on your experience and your past companies. So, yeah.
Okay. So Prashant has a question for us. He asks us if I am applying for a job and choosing JavaScript as a programming language, and do I need to learn JavaScript in depth?
Uh, well, if it's a technical interview, not really in depth, learn JavaScript as much as the data structures and basic libraries are concerned, like sorting or priority queues and then those basic stuff. You don't have to learn in depth about JavaScript closures or things like that. But if the job requires, if the nature of the technical interview is on that language, there might be some interviews which are very specific on technology. At that time, you might have to learn. But for a coding interview, which is data structures and algorithms, no, you only need to know as much as that data structures and algorithms is concerned.
Okay. So we have another question here from Roshan Kumar. How to get better with object-oriented design, not necessarily from interview perspective, but how to be good in general.
Great question, Roshan. Object-oriented design is so crucial. Like we forget practicing that. And object-oriented, I would say it only comes with practice. So I remember this course I took while doing masters here in software engineering. So that was system and object-oriented design course. You should read good books. Actually, for object-oriented design, I'll say you should be going whole comprehensive, read all material, read through all design patterns. You know what? Initially, design patterns are used throughout all companies. More than basic concept, they might ask you a question about some specific design patterns. So it's more of a reading thing. And if you don't understand something, do look at videos which have a good video explanation of those design patterns. And object oriented, it's like a thing that doesn't come very easily. Like you have to learn what is inheritance, what is this, uh, how it is done. uh, I mean, it is different in C++, it's different in Java. So go through all the comprehensive material for that. But you know what, it's not always required in each interview. For data structures and algorithms interview, you might have to write some object oriented code for some good design. But you can again approach that like, oh, this question requires this concept, so I can practice this concept and then go in depth with that. Yeah.
Okay. So Dhaval Saxena asked us this question. Is it good to sign a bond as a fresher?
I've always been like against signing bonds. They bind you to a contract which, and if you are not happy, you'll be wasting good years. If the bond is maybe a year or two, and your job description is good and it's your first job, it's okay. But if you're not getting good calls, but refrain from that signing bonds, try to get offers and maybe negotiate on the bond. Maybe say, hey, I don't want to sign this long a bond, can you shorten it? Try negotiating on that. But refrain from that, yeah, if possible.
I hope that answers your question, Dhaval. And we have another question here. I have my technical interview at Doctor in a month. I have been solving algorithm questions and sometimes feels like I am not getting closer to the confidence level I'd want. What do you advise?
Great question, Habib. So confidence level, it doesn't come easy. The thing is, There's so much questions out there that you'll always feel underprepared. You'll feel like, hey, I haven't practiced this sort of questions. So pick questions from each category, practice the real interview questions, and at the end nobody can tell you that, hey, you'll get a questions from this set. So maybe if you're preparing from total, then prepare for the set from first, exhaust all the questions that you see online for that company, then maybe jump into other questions. And at the end you'll only gain confidence when you have given a bunch of interviews. And you know what, just go with that mindset, hey, doesn't matter what, I'm just going to give this interview for the sake of my like own career building, and just don't have too much expectations attached to that. Then you will have more nervousness going into that interview. Like first time I went for the Google interview, I was so nervous, like oh my god, I can't tell, like I couldn't think straightforward. So it's like, tell it's a normal interview, it's just I'm going to crack it. Build that confidence, at least it will help during the interview. Think that you are like, you know what, the majority of the public who work, engineers who work in these companies, are people like us who are not from IIT or Ivy Leagues. Okay, don't undermine yourself in that sense. The majority is people who have come from average colleges, average companies, and still working for all those top tech leaders. So
Okay, so we have another question here. Let's wait for some new questions. We have this question here by Ganeshan. I had some experience in the past that interviewer just asking the questions which he prepared already and expects the candidate the pre-prepared answer. So how to find those interviewers and how to manage them.
my God, Ganeshan, you speak my heart there. There are so many interviewers out there who will just have, because even for them it's like, hey, I just want to go ahead and take this interview, I'll maybe memorize this question, only look for this answer. There are experience with bad interviewers, there are few bad interviewers out there, and at that point you might have to convey your answer, explain your answer in a better way. I'm sorry to say this, uh, that's why we have a luck factor. You might be unlucky and getting a bad interviewer out there. Some interviewers are totally silent, they'll not even react to good answer, and you'll be like, oh my god, is the answer okay or not? And some interviewers might be like keep nudging you throughout your question, they'll not give you time to think. So you'll get all type of interviews out there. So in both cases you have to drive the interview. Don't let, so you know what, in such cases where interview is prepared, take your time, like maybe slow down, don't get aggressive, or don't like try to convey your answer. Listen to them and then try to answer your prepared question, like your prepared answer. Try to convince them maybe in the language they know. And at the end, you know what, even you have answered correct, I'm sorry to say this, but they might not like it. And you know, you cannot even go ahead and fight with the recruiter. You can always submit maybe your experience on all these blog posts and forums out there. Take your heat out there. It's an experience that you get, and hopefully you don't get such an interview, bad interviewer. It's not so many out there, but I mean, yeah.
Let's hope for the best. Cross
Yes.
fingers. Thank you, Ganeshan, for asking that question. Thank you, everybody, for dropping in your questions and giving us your precious time. So, thank you so much, Ashish, for taking the time to explain us the nitty-gritties which go into acing a tech interview. We hope all our viewers found this live stream very helpful. And if any of our viewers have any questions for Ashish, I think you can reach out to him via LinkedIn.
Sure. LinkedIn is the best way. Yeah. Do reach out. Do feel free to connect, and I'm happy to answer all your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned for further live streams.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.